Yinnies, today I have a real treat for you. We're going to talk about Yoga Nidra. First of all, am I saying that right? We'll find out. We're going to have a chat with my friend and colleague, Kaya Mindlin, and we have been trying to have this interview for, I swear, over a year and just couldn't get our schedules to line up. She had to cancel once, I had to cancel once. So needless to say, it's been a long time coming. And the goal of this episode is to answer the question that was put to her by one of our mutual students, which was, can you do Yoga Nidra and Yin together? And I know a lot of you do. And a lot of you might be Nidra curious. Maybe you want to take some training, you want to learn more about it. So whether you're already a raving fan of Yoga Nidra or you're considering taking some training and adding it to your repertoire, whether it's your Yin classes or your other classes, then this episode is for you. Okay. Before we get into Kaya's bio and the interview, I do want to share this little nugget here of a review of the podcast. A great resource for Yin teachers by Jen Ragg. This is a little podcast review. I recently discovered this podcast, and now I'm in the process of diving into past episodes, as it is both fun and informative. If you are a total Yin Yoga geek like me, you will love the depth of Nick's knowledge, as well as her authenticity and humor. She asks insightful questions when she interviews guests. As a Yin teacher, these are the same questions I would ask. I just led a 15-hour Yin intensive this weekend and included this podcast on my list of resources. Thank you for sharing your passion for this powerful practice. Thank you, Jen, and thanks for sharing the love, sharing the podcast. I really appreciate that. My friends, let me introduce you to today's guest. Now, I will tell you, if there is anything that I need to know about the Vedic tradition, stuff that's going on out there in the Yogaverse that's not necessarily accurate, how to pronounce anything in Sanskrit, etc., Kaya's my gal. This is who I go to. So let's learn a little bit more about Kaya. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about my friend and guest, Kaya. Kaya is a trusted teacher guiding many of today's yoga teachers and longtime practitioners. Mature seekers resonate with her authentic approach that synthesizes the mystical and the practical. With over 24 years of teaching experience and the blessing of her gurus as a steward of the Vedic tradition, Kaya expertly weaves enlivened Vedic storytelling and scripture, devotional rituals, chanting, Vedanta, Tantra, yoga therapy, Vedic astrology, and the Ayurveda, as well in a rich, accessible style. She has been training teachers in a mystical householder approach to yoga, Nidra, since 2013. Students find their yoga home in Kaya's inclusive and deep approach that prioritizes the student-teacher relationship, as well as the sacred container in which anything can be fodder for spiritual growth. She lives in a seaside village in the US with her husband, a masterful Vedic astrologer, and her 2 children. And the next time you hear from me, I will be with Kaya. Okay, Yin friends, just a reminder that this is an adult podcast with adult subject matter, and that I have the mouth of a sailor and the soul of a mermaid. So there is no guarantee there will be colorful language, but there's also no guarantees there won't be. So if you have small people around, go grab some headphones now. And now, welcome, Kaya. I'm so glad you're finally here.
Glad to be with you, Nick.
Those of you who don't know, because you weren't, in our emails, is we've been trying to do this for over a year and we just couldn't get calendars to line up. And then life happened and Kaya had to cancel once and I had surgeries and I had to cancel, and it's been a long time coming. So I'm so glad that we're finally doing this. Before we dive into today's topic, I would love for you to share, it doesn't have to be a novel, but also doesn't have to be Reader's Digest version, your sort of journey from finding yoga and then becoming a teacher, if you don't mind.
Sure. I found yoga in my early 20s. Maybe I was about 20 years old. As a child, I was asking internally a lot of very deep questions. Why are we here? Why do people suffer? What is happiness? These kinds of questions, but I never said them out loud to anyone because I never heard anyone outside my head asking these kinds of questions. And that led me to go and study sociology at university because I thought all the answers would be in understanding sort of societal level dynamics. And that led me to studying philosophy. And I ended up in a class with a professor who was teaching religion, philosophy, Eastern philosophy, meditation, things like that. It turned out that he had a guru in a Hindu lineage and taught us to meditate as homework in one of these classes. And I fell in love with the Eastern teachings, philosophy, scripture, and the practice of meditation. And simultaneously, I had grown up being a dancer and an athlete and very much doing things with my body. So when I then found out that there was an aspect of this tradition that had something to do with the body, I was, of course, very curious. So I went to my first asana class in a gym when I was about 20, 21 years old and completely fell in love. And I did have a moment lying there in the Shavasana, kind of guided awareness at the end. I had kind of a flash phrase that came up from inside that said, "You're going to teach this." And so after that, I just took every yoga class, did every yoga VHS video. They were VHS videos at the time.
I remember.
I could do, right? I was just doing yoga all day in between working, and I was supposed to go get my PhD in sociology and bailed on that program at the last minute in pursuit of studying yoga. And so I went on to go to yoga therapy school, and that led me to Ayurveda school, and that led me to Vedic astrology studies, and on and on. So, but it all started in university with these religion, philosophy, Eastern philosophy classes.
It's so interesting because you came at it the exact opposite way from how most people come into yoga now. Most people,
Right.
they go to the gym, try their class, or they, get dragged to a hot class or something. And then later, as the spark continues, they start to dive into the more esoteric and kind of inward journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love that. I wanted to touch on that part that you said you have as a little girl, you had these like big questions, but you never asked anybody just because you thought,
I just thought they were strange. And I probably could intuit that nobody that was in my world had answers to those questions. And they felt very deep and very private, almost. I think I was almost secretive about the fact that I was having those kinds of thoughts. And then I also had a childhood trauma, the loss of my father when I was 10 years old, very suddenly. And I think as those who've had childhood traumas, sudden losses, things like that, know or can probably relate to, that kind of exacerbates various patterns for better or worse. And I think that experience definitely caused me to ask those questions even more. Why do we suffer?
Oh, of course.
Is happiness possible? And so on. So that kind of, I think, solidified that internal seeker in me. Yeah.
That's very cool. I was also a child of intense, deep thoughts, but I said mine all out loud and then made the adults around me very uncomfortable. I think I was 3 the first time I sat on Santa's knee and he asked what I wanted for Christmas. And I said world peace.
Right. Yes.
And I kept doing that till I was about 6. And then finally my mom took me aside and said, "Sweetheart, I don't think that's Santa's department." It's like, oh.
Shouldn't it be?
So I'm just supposed to ask for toys then? lame, you know?
Totally lame.
Yeah.
Yeah. I came
Yeah.
from a very theatrical, my family's very theatrical. Everybody is a performer. And so there was a lot of say the funny things out loud, sing. There was a lot of expression, but there wasn't a lot of spoken depth.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes. And then I think the second one was when I was like 6 in Canada at the time. I don't think they still do it now because we're still apparently still a colony from England. We're
Right.
not. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we used to sing the anthem and then God Save the Queen. And I would sing the anthem and then I would sit down and the teacher would get very irate with, why are you not standing up and singing God Save the Queen? And my little child brain was like, well, we don't have a queen. We're Canada. We have a prime minister. And then I said to her, and if we're going to sing to England's queen, shouldn't we sing to all the queens?
Why she's so special.
Why not all of them? Shouldn't we be fair? And so, yeah, to the office. So that was, I wasn't quite smart enough to keep them in my head.
You were very punk, you were punk rock from the get.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that's wonderful. And so tell me about your early teacher then. Like so you're like, okay, I love this yoga stuff. Now I want to become a teacher. Did you go to India first? Did you find someone locally first?
What happened is I was studying with anyone and everyone. And then I hitched a ride I'm from the East Coast of the US. I hitched a ride to Colorado and then made friends with someone. And then I met his mother. And his mother said, you remind me of my yoga teacher. You should meet her someday if ever you have the chance. And then I ended up getting all the way to California. And this man's mother called me and said, remember that teacher I told you about? She's teaching a workshop down the street from where you're living now, and you should go. So I went and I took this workshop, and it was in the style that I ended up studying. It was very slow, very therapeutic. I was 23 years old and I thought it was extremely boring. But I made a friend at the class, and she was in her 40s. And so she thought it was very compelling because that is usually the time when you want to do slow practice. And she said, let's go find out more about this style. And I said, well, I don't really care. And I'm in my 20s and have nothing else to do. And so, sure. So we went and we explored this style of yoga that I ended up studying. And I wasn't sure about the slow pace. It was yoga therapy, and I wasn't completely convinced about the pace of it. But what I loved was that it was very in-depth. Remember, I was supposed to go get my PhD. And so 200 hours just didn't seem like anything. It was just a drop in the bucket. And so this was 750 hours to begin with.
Beautiful.
And so it was really about, for me at the time, it was about doing something that was super in-depth. And I really, though the requirement as is with this kind of program was that you begin teaching essentially right away so that you're in the field, which does make sense. You're really not a teacher yet, but you're practicing in the field. And I think I had 3 students for a few years, but I really didn't feel like I could claim the title teacher before that 750 hours. And then now even looking back, I'm like, can you really claim that at 750 hours either? I mean, I really think it takes kind of 12 years to get to that call yourself a teacher place. But yeah, it was less about a teacher than it was about the depth of study. And then that led to many more hours. That was really just the beginning, was that 750 hours. And the teachers that I really talk about as my core teachers now are really back to my roots where I started yoga, are my gurus that really taught more scripture. And those teachers were in India and in the US and in Canada, actually, interestingly. And those are my Tantra and Vedanta gurus that I learned more of the scriptural studies that are my heart. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day about this. I was saying that most what we call teacher training programs are instructor training programs, not teacher training programs.
Correct. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to have been teaching a totally different material before I took my first teacher training. So there was some things I didn't have to learn, like being comfortable standing at the room, projecting my voice, being able to see the room, to understand when people weren't understanding what I was saying, and like, how could I rephrase that or show it or say it? And like all of that was already there, luckily.
Yes.
And so then it was just learning the asana. And still, I would say for at least the first 8 years, I was a yoga instructor. Yeah. I did include meditation, but I was barking out alignment cues and,
right. Following that. Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because reflecting on that, thinking about my own background, I had the background of doing theater, doing performance, doing dance, theatrical performances on stage. And I think being in front of a room and essentially doing a script came very easily. Having enough charisma, which you need to have charisma as a teacher, being able to project my voice, being able to be comfortable, having people look at me and tell them what to do. And there's an aspect of performance, I think, in teaching anything. You could be a lecturer, but a good lecturer needs to have a little bit of that entertainment factor. But that's still different from what I grew into, what you grew into as well, which is really being present to the people in the room, being responsive, seeing things, and letting teachings, which doesn't come at the beginning. You have to have them digested and assimilated, and then things come out of you spontaneously in relationship. I think that for me, that journey from it being a performance and following a script then later shifted into something that became very relational. Yes. Which is why now that I teach online, I still always teach everything live. It just hasn't worked for me to pre-record things, because for me, teaching is a relationship, and I need to see, even if many people are just following by recording, for me, when I'm teaching, I need that humanity and that seeing people and having the relationship there.
Yeah. I agree. Actually, it was interesting when I was hired briefly by a company to do some pre-recorded video. And had I not been a yoga instructor, air quotes, for so many years, there's no way I could have done that. But I did have, like you said, the script, and this is where I say this. And now but it left my soul empty.
Right.
Because I'm talking to a camera.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm with you. I don't, people have asked me why I don't put my trainings online completely. And I'm like, because even if it's online, I want to see your face. I want to, read the room, even if it's a Zoom room. I want to hear your questions. I want to know what I wasn't like. It's relational, 100% for me. Yeah. Can't even imagine. And I suppose I could sit here and talk to a camera, but like, there wouldn't be any joy in it then for me.
Yeah. And that probably is the difference between teaching and instructing. Instructing need not be relational. It's why I've never used the term cue. I'm not even sure, I don't know about you, but I don't think the word cue, it definitely wasn't used when I was coming up and studying yoga. We never said cues. I heard that it was probably 10 years after I did training that I heard people using the term cue, which I thought was so funny because I knew it from theater. And I knew it from dancing. So, and it sounds so mechanical.
Yes.
Yeah. We're not cueing people. We're teaching people.
Yeah.
We're not doing cueing sounds like choreography to me, not teaching.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. The other little nugget there that I thought when you were just talking that really stood out to me is, and I can't remember how you phrase it, so I'm going to paraphrase it and see if I get it close. You said that then there was a point where when you start to become a teacher, where those little, I call them your spidey senses come in, where you get those little messages that are like, you should say this, or you should talk about this, and that had happened to me for probably about 3 years before I listened to them. I kept just going, shut up, back to hamstrings. Like, I just was like turning it off. I was like, nope.
That's not in the script.
Why in the world would I suddenly tell that story? That makes no sense, or for years I heard that I should chant to my students to bring them out of Shavasana. Years I heard that in my head. I'm a former singer. So I heard it for over and over, and I was like, nope. And then I remembered that one of my teachers, who she has a pleasant voice, but like she probably sang in the church choir, like nothing spectacular, her voice, right? Used to sing to us at the end of Shavasana. And I remember how every time it like opened my heart and moved me to tears. And then I was like, why are you not doing this?
Mm-hmm.
It's foolish. So yes, eventually I stopped being so obsessed with the physical part and all these so-called alignment rules that I had learned in my first tradition. And really, I think that's when I started stepping into the role of teacher. That and forgetting my lesson plan a few times and having to go.
Yeah, that'll do it. Go on the
Awesome.
fly.
Yeah. All right, let's figure this out. Yeah. That's so beautiful. It's beautiful to hear. I love hearing other teachers that have been teaching a long time and their journey from sort of, eager student to maybe even like reluctant teacher to instructor to teacher to then like just embracing it and saying, okay, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And the time, it really does take time. And we're such ever year after year, a more sped up culture.
Yes.
We're so urgent. We're in such a hurry. And actually, when I was in the midst of that first 750 hours of training, I took a year off in the middle because I felt I was supposed to be tracking along at a particular pace. And I just felt this is not assimilated. And so I held off on the final segment. I just waited a year. They tried to convince me to come, and I'm waiting and waiting. So when I finally got to that fourth segment, I was in a cohort then with another person who had sped through it. She had done it all in a year, and I had taken 4 years to do that first 750 hours. And we had to teach each other as part of that, segment. And she said afterwards, your teaching is so dramatically different than mine. Even though we've done the same training. And I said, the only reason I can think is that I took my time doing it and you sped through it, and it'll come. But the time, it doesn't, the information, that's kind of a transactional idea about studying something is, well, I got the information. What difference does it make how fast I get it? But there is this digestion and assimilation period that's so necessary for becoming a teacher.
Oh, yes. I remember in my yoga therapy training, they would always have us do at the end of the module, we had to do this like little practice teaching segment. Now, right. I will say I had already been teaching for 13 years before I went there. So that part might have been quite useful for newer teachers. But for me, I was like, what do you mean teach this information I just learned? Like, I have to go home with this. I have to meditate with it. I have to practice with it in my body. I have to sit with it for a while. I have to like come up with the words that feel like my words to describe. I was like, what do you mean just teach it? Oh, you mean like robotically repeat what you just told me? Okay. So memorize and
regurgitate, not teach, right?
Like, okay, I can do that. But I was like, I just was always like, no, I need to take this home with me first. I need to meditate on it. I need to sleep with it. I need to embody it. I need to think about it while I'm in the bathtub. I need to it needs to become part of my daily life before I can then just speak it in a way that feels authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do find it, I'm sure you find this too, although I have a feeling that you, just by how the nature of who you are as a teacher and what I know about you, that you probably tend to attract teachers that are already wanting way more depth and to go slower than a lot of this sort of, what did somebody call it? A colleague the other day told me that it was the paper chasers that burnt her out from training teachers. And I had never heard that before.
Wanting certifications.
Yeah, she called them paper chasers. And I was like, what be a paper chaser? I do not know of this. And I think I had a bit more of that in the beginning with my program, but I just essentially keep making mine longer. So they
that'll
leave.
Do it.
Yeah. I was like,
if they want that paper, I don't want to wait for it.
When I was in the yoga therapy program and teaching this, it was like 2 20-hour modules. And I was like, how can I do this in 20-hour modules? But I did my best to just make it like an introduction. And then the first one I ran on my own was 50 hours. And as soon as I was done that, I was like, not long enough. And then 60 and then 80. And now we're at 100. And I wouldn't be surprised if it just keeps going from there at some point.
Right.
And I spread it out over a season. So in that 100 hours, it's like fall, all of spring, so that they have that time to come up with questions and review materials. And yeah, I've done immersive trainings.
you're building time into the process. I see if I can remember my Jyotisha teacher, he would say how we learn depends on the teacher. Let's see. You need the teacher, you need the sangha or the community of other students, you need the knowledge, and you need time.
Yeah.
Those are like the 4 components to have you actually learn something. So you're building it in.
Do you want to let
time.
do you want to let those know who may have heard you say Jyota a couple times what that is? Because I will bet you there's a percentage.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. There's a huge percentage of yoga teachers that are like Googling now, trying to spell that. Yeah.
Okay. Jyotisha, people will often translate, I myself included, though it's not exactly accurate, as Vedic astrology. It's really astronomy and astrology, and it is considered the eye of the Veda, as we call it. It is a way of seeing meaning in various structures of the manifestation, including the stars and planets, including your palms and hands, your body, omenology. So it's a way of seeing phenomenon in the material realm and then interpreting it in a meaningful way. And so it's called Jyotisha. And it's sort of like a skill of having what we would call divine eyes, an ability to see the unseeable by reading pattern. And the most common application of it is the patterns of the stars and planets.
And although this isn't an episode on astrology, one thing I do know is that it is different from Western astrology.
Very.
And that sometimes your zodiac can change.
Yes.
When I had mine done, I've had it done twice now because I like to make sure. I was going to say I'm a skeptic. I'm not an astrology skeptic, but I'm just a practitioner.
I get multiple readings a year myself. Yeah. So there's no limit.
So I was really curious to see, like, okay, is my zodiac going to change? My sun sign did not. In fact, I was more Sagittarius, but my moon sign did. And it was actually very uncomfortable for me. I was just like, no, I don't want that one. Like, no.
You had to see the unseeable.
I was like, but I don't think that resonates at all. And then the wonderful gal who was doing it with me, she said, so what it was is that I thought I was Sag Sun, Cancer Moon, Western. Apparently Sag Sun, Gemini Moon. And I went, that's of course. And I was like, Gemini? Because anyone that I had known, and I'm going to apologize right now to any of the Geminis out there, but maybe this is just my own experience. Most of the Gemini women I knew, they were so inconsistent that I was just like, which is it? Like, it was so frustrating to me because there was that whole twinning. And I'd be like, I don't understand. Yesterday, you literally said this, and now you're saying something else. And so I just said to her, I was like, I don't think that could be right. And she said, says the punk rock yoga teacher. And I was like, oh, okay. Maybe I'll sit with this a little longer then.
Yeah. I mean, it's more about what we call in Sanskrit dvisva. It's an ability to be two things. It's an ability to kind of straddle two things or to have nuance. And it doesn't necessarily mean this like twinning or being contradictory or something like that. Yeah.
No, and that's a very kind of Western way of looking at it. Western astrology is like, oh, I'm twinning, or I'm like, yeah. But yeah, when she said that, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, there is definitely dichotomy and comfort with it in me. That is for sure. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Anyways, we digress. Now I'm going to say, oftentimes you hear it said as Yoga Nidra.
Right.
I've been trying to correct myself because, of course, I said it like everyone else did the wrong way for many years into saying Yoga Nidra. But is that even correct? How do we say this?
Okay. So yeah, that's pretty darn close. And those who are on YouTube can watch my mouth as well. So that can be helpful. So yoga, nobody really mispronounces yoga. So yoga. And then the next word, nidra. Means sleep. And so to really do it super correctly, your tongue for the N and the D sound comes in contact with your teeth and even a little bit through your teeth. Nidra. Nidra. And
Nidra.
then really this is a chanted language. And so there will be kind of a sing-songy pattern to it when you say the words together. Yoga Nidra, like that.
So you all can pause it, rewind, repeat after Kaya a few times. That will help.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have these little pause and rewind buttons on podcasts. Yeah. So I know I've been trying, but again, I don't have the tongue down quite.
Yeah, and we do our best, and it's a skill. And again, it takes time if it's not your native tongue. And not everybody, just like I say, Sanskrit pronunciation is very much like music. Some people have more of a skill and capacity to hear notes, to sing, to make sounds, to hear the difference, let alone pronounce the difference. And so it's the same with Sanskrit. There's going to be different capacities. So you do your best.
Yes. And then just, when you learn you're saying something wrong, just go,
yeah, no shame, no problem.
I've been doing that wrong the whole time. Yes. It's the same. And I don't use a lot of Mandarin terms when I teach my Yin Yoga because, again, don't speak Mandarin. But so, for example, people will often think it's yin yang and it's yang, but it's also, I just recently learned maybe a couple of years ago, it's not really either yin. Even the Y would be silent if you were saying it with a Mandarin accent. I don't do that because then nobody literally knows what I'm talking about.
In yang or something.
Yeah, in yang. Yeah. So it's interesting when we try to, as Westerners, learn new languages.
And Mandarin and those languages, I mean, that's really next level. My husband and I have quite a few Taiwanese and Chinese friends and clients. And one of them, I would try to say words in Chinese and she would say, stop it, don't bother.
Thank you for trying. Please stop now.
But stop.
Yes. Oh, that's funny. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to talk about this topic, other than, of course, the fact that they were friends and colleagues, was so I had taken a Yoga Nidra training, working on that, in my yoga therapy training, and I really loved it. But it was very much like that teacher had taken her training from, and now his name is escaping me. Is it Richard Miller? Maybe
that sounds right.
The guy that did a lot, he did a lot of stuff with veterans and so
it's escaping me as well.
Yes, I don't menopause brain. I'm going to blame it on that. So as soon as the interview's over, the name will pop right into my head. And so that was a very westernized, if that's a word, form of that training. And so there was a lot more focus on kind of and it was a short course, so like tiny, but more of the kind of like scientific aspect and like trauma and what populations you could use it for. That was more of the framework than a more traditional, or I don't want to say authentic, but I'm going to say authentic and people can shoot me later, authentic way of learning it. And so when I learned, and I remember it too clearly, because it was like the beginning of what I now call the dun, 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 because I hate saying the word COVID. It was the beginning and you were offering it online and we were all sheltering in place. And so I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to sign up for this course. And so I took your training, which I loved. I remember it very clearly too, because we were living downstairs and we had very deep windowsills and I didn't have a desk for my laptop. So I would tuck my laptop like into the windowsill and like sit on my bed. For our training.
What a perfect place to take a Yoga Nidra program in your bed.
Yes. And I really loved the training. And I feel like it's the kind of thing that I could take probably like 5 to 6 more trainings on it before I ever felt like I could like fully check that off the list, so to speak. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about, first of all, like, what is it? Because some people will say it's sleep. Some people say it's meditation. Some people say it's like if sleep and meditation had a baby. What exactly is it?
Okay. Yoga Nidra, it's actually in the word. So it is, we'll put it simply and then we can kind of unpack it, of course. So Yoga Nidra, we can say, is the deep sleep state. So first of all, it's important to know that it's not the name of the technique, although we do use it as shorthand. We'll say a Yoga Nidra practice, but really it's technically not the name of the technique. It's the name of a potential state of consciousness in which you are in the deep sleep state in terms of the brain waves and the body, with your own personal awareness retained. So it is conscious deep sleep.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. And that state is elusive.
Yes.
Because I know many times, this is why I don't do Yoga Nidra classes in public anymore, because I will go from there to sleep very quickly, which means now there's snoring and I'm now potentially affecting my karma. So I do it at home in private. But I do know the state that you speak of, because I have had that in that practice where it's like, oh, I'm so, I don't even know the word, sort of relaxed and like swimming in the universe right now. And I'm completely aware of what the teacher is saying at the same time. Yeah, it's very unique.
It is unique. And yes, if you're doing a guided practice, it is elusive. As you said, you may or may not go into that state. You may come in and out of that state. And you may be in other states of consciousness that are very beneficial, but aren't Yoga Nidra states. So you could fall asleep. It's very beneficial to sleep. We know how beneficial sleep is. The ancients have described it, and modern neuroscientists describe the benefits of sleep and so on. You could be in the dream state, also very beneficial, very healing. You could be in a reverie state, which is like a lot of people will call it the snooze button state. It's that you're not quite asleep and you're not quite awake and you're not quite dreaming. You're something in between, kind of a transitional reverie place, which is very blissful. That's why people love that snooze button. They're always like, why is that the best sleep? Because you're not really sleeping, you're in a reverie state. So all of those are very healing, very beneficial, can be very blissful, and they're not the Yoga Nidra state. And so, yeah, that Yoga Nidra state in the course, one of the ways that I describe it, because it's hard to describe it, it is like you are in a closet where all the walls and the floor and the ceiling are painted black, and there's no light. And you go into that closet and you close your eyes, and that is like unconscious deep sleep. You're in nothingness and you're unconscious, you're non-seeing. And then you open your eyes in that same environment. What do you see? Nothing. But you're seeing, you're conscious. And so
interesting.
Then we can get into, well, why would you want to go into that state? And there we look at the ancient scriptures, which describe that the deep sleep state is under the jurisdiction of what we can call the Karana Sharira in Sanskrit, meaning the causal body, the realm of the unseeable. And it is the place where we can say the samskara, another Sanskrit word, it means the seeds of karma are living. So the unseeable seeds of your karmas, the things that are behind your thoughts and your desires and your tendencies. What's behind that is these samskaras, these karmic seeds. They, so to speak, live in the karana sharira. So they're not quite seeable, but they're there. They're more subtle than subtle. And in that Yoga Nidra place, why we want to go into the Yoga Nidra state is because this is where the unseeable seeds of karma reside. And then we can, so to speak, work with them. We see them on some level. And so in that state, though you're not doing anything because you're asleep, but something happens wherein difficult karmic seeds that want to be burnt, we can say, so they don't further grow or resolved, can be resolved or burnt. And also we have positive karmic seeds that we might want to nurture and nourish, auspicious seeds that will lead to auspicious tendencies, that lead to auspicious thoughts and actions. So it is in the Yoga Nidra state that we can work with. Work is a weird, it's not accurate exactly, but we can be with these seeds of karma.
Very cool. I'm sure you said all of that the first time I took the training, but now I was going to say, but now hearing it again, this is why, dear teachers.
Come again. I mean, even that's, that was an older iteration of the course, an older iteration of the teacher, or younger iteration of the teacher.
It changes. It changes. I know this is why teachers, we take things more than one time, because
we keep going over and over and over again. In fact, I remember going to a course with one of my gurus, and someone said, "Oh, you're back again? You did this course like so many times. What are you, stuck in a rut?" I said, "No, I'm not stuck in a rut. I'm digging a well."
And it's different
thing.
each time.
It's different each time. Teachers different, students
you're
different, peers are different.
Yes. I think we've all had that experience where we've been in a teacher's class that we've studied with many times, and they say something that all of a sudden kind of makes you up a little, or like shifts a paradigm, and you're like, that thing that you said, and they're like, yeah, I say that every time.
I say it every time.
Oh, this time I heard it for some reason, Yes. Oh.
Yeah. And what I was just talking about, the definition of what is Yoga Nidra and the purpose of it, kind of working with these secrets within, is a little bit of the explanation of why Yoga Nidra is not meditation, is not relaxation, as beneficial as meditation and relaxation are. And as much as those things may occur spontaneously when you're doing a guided awareness, in meditation and in relaxation and in sleep and in all reverie, we don't have access to those karmic seeds, though many other beneficial things happen.
Mm-hmm. So it really is like, as far as the yoga practices go, its own special unicorn.
It's its own special unicorn.
Yeah.
Which is why it so beautifully stands alone, and it is so beautifully compatible with other practices. And it's what I think of as my sort of specialty. It is really a place where accessible and advanced merge. It's both and everything in between. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's very true. I know that when I guide, I think most of my students are either experiencing the kind of thinking mind while they're there, or they experience the sleep. But I do know that some of them do grace the place that you were speaking of, just by, and not every time, of course. One thing that really struck me when you were talking about these seeds and how this is the place where like they can be burnt away, or that this is it's the processing place of these seeds. It's like not the best word, but sometimes the poetic words escape me for a while.
It's the soil where these seeds are.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One thing that is, and I want to just tell everybody, the reason that I wanted to have Kaya on to talk about this is we do have a mutual student that asked the question, can you do Yin Yoga and Yoga Nidra? And Kaya was like, I know nothing of Yin Yoga, so I cannot answer that question. And so I thought, well, what a perfect conversation we could have, because I know Yin Yoga. And what I was thinking of, one parallel, but in a very more conscious and superficial way, is that when people practice Yin, assuming the teacher is comfortable and competent enough to hold brave, quiet space, and to let whatever is going to come up for people come up without judging it or fixing it or changing it or all the things, that it's a far more obviously conscious way. But I mean, that is one of the things that people find, not the physical poses, because if you're doing Yin well, those shouldn't be extreme. So it's not it's not the sensations of the pose, although we do feel them. But often the challenge for students is this still quiet time where they are left with nothing but their mind and their emotions and their obsessive thought patterns and all of that. And so it almost really just shines a light on what's always there while you're walking down the street, doing your groceries. Those same repetitive obsessive thoughts are there. You're just not aware of them until you slow down and then go, oh, I think all the time, and it's the same stuff. Or of course, other things can come up, memories, emotions, things like that. But it's done in a very like awake state.
Right.
And it's almost like I sometimes say that yin yoga is like the gateway drug to some of these more meditative states,
Yeah,
because
I
people
see
will
that.
do it that won't do other quieter practices yet. Yeah.
Right. Because they're still doing something with the body.
Yes.
Still
And
feels
it's
a
like,
little bit like you can accomplish something or
and
make
it's 5
something
minutes.
happen.
They're only left there in the pose quietly for 5 minutes. It's
Yeah.
not an hour and so it's like bite-sized attempts. But yeah, so I often say it is a gateway drug to these quieter practices that tend to be more excavating, even so, like on a unconscious level. Whereas when we're in yin, it's mostly conscious level stuff. Although there are things that are perhaps in your unconscious mind that you weren't aware of until you sit still and quiet, and then it becomes a conscious thought or memory.
Similar to a guided awareness where we're
Yeah.
usually starting with the material, we're starting conscious and, guiding the material body, and then it kind of trails into the depths and then into the silence. Is similar, I would imagine, to maybe a yin pose where you're working with the material and then you're progressively left there in progressive quietude. And it makes sense too that perhaps people that are attracted to yin being a slower, more receptive practice, quieter practice, would also be attracted to or resonate with Yoga Nidra.
I have noticed with Yoga Nidra practitioners, teachers, that some styles are very, and teachers perhaps, and I don't know if it's lineage or just personal, what we come into it with, very just simple, like it's body scan, but it's not super. And then there's some where it's like every single word they say is a poem and everything has a visual. And do you know what I mean? Like there seems to be these two kind of styles.
Right.
And I'll just out myself as a practitioner. I actually do better with the more kind of physical body scan, maybe a little bit more practical verbiage, because I'm a very visual person. So if someone's describing things very poetically, now I'm up in my head actually picturing everything they're saying instead of kind of dropping in. It was the same reason why when I used to study meditation with my primary teacher, whenever we would move into the visualization ones where we were to look at a picture and then recreate it in our mind, it was never a great style for me because I'd be like, done, now what?
Right.
Whereas other people would struggle to recreate those things. So I find if somebody's talking in almost in a quite a poetic way, I think it's beautiful, but it doesn't really allow me to go deep as well as if there was just a little bit less descriptive words, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, in general with teaching, and definitely with Yoga Nidra, maybe more than any other aspect of teaching or component, I will often say to teachers, you want to be responsible and out of the way as possible. And so that people can have, so students can have their experience. And so, though, as you know, in my Yoga Nidra training, I guide after we do a lot of teaching about what we're doing and so on. Then I teach how to write your own script, because within the container of the purpose, there is a lot of diversity of expression, at least in the approach that I have, in how that can be executed. And there is a place for a little more language, but we have to be really careful about overdoing it. And sometimes it's just the teacher falling in love with language. And I often find too, when the teacher is so in love with a certain phrase, that's usually a tell that it's in the way, that it's a distraction, or that it's pulling people out of the experience. But there is a range there for what would work for different people. Like I said, Yoga Nidra is the state of consciousness, and the guided awareness, we can say, is the technique or the vehicle. So just like lots of different vehicles can take us to a destination, right? There's lots of different techniques that have the potential. Nothing can promise or guarantee it, but different techniques have the potential to be a vehicle to the Yoga Nidra state. But not all vehicles are right for all terrains, right? And you can think of yourself as a terrain, and you have to know, as you're knowing, what kind of vehicle works for your terrain as a vehicle to the Yoga Nidra state, which is beautiful to see it like you're doing. You're saying, this doesn't work for me. And that's good to know, instead of saying that works for so-and-so. What's wrong with me that it doesn't work? And that comes from maturity that you have. But, some people might say, well, that's a very popular style. Everybody else seems to like it and do it, and it doesn't work for me. Well, that's because it's not the right vehicle for your terrain. And also sometimes it's done badly. I mean, there's plenty of people claiming to be expert in something or trying something, and it's really not an effective vehicle. And that's also true, can be true.
And if I didn't know that I am such a visual person, I probably wouldn't have the awareness to say, okay, that style isn't for me. Maybe I would be a little harder on myself and be like, why isn't this working? Why don't I love this the way everyone else does? But it's only because I have that prior meditation experience that I know,
that what works. So then you know what doesn't work, and what you are capable of, or the places that you have been before in terms of your interior. And so that it's there waiting for you. And so you can tell when something isn't working. Yeah.
Feeling words work well for me.
Like
visual
sensing.
Yes, sensing and feeling works well for me. Visualizing just pulls me up into my head again. And now I'm actually picturing it.
I'm similar in terms of visualization does not work for me, but it's actually because I'm bad at visualizing.
The other end of the
so then
scale.
I end up in a thinking place, which is different from visualizing.
Right.
And that's out of the body. So I personally do use at the beginning stages of a guided awareness, a lot of sensing, because you want to, in my opinion and experience, you want to be in your body. And so you're sensing your body, which is here and now in the present moment. And then, on the inside, and this is probably where a lot of that visualization stuff maybe comes from, when you go deeply within, you are in an entire universe where the ancient scriptures describe all of the deities are there, and all the seas and oceans and rivers and mountains are there as well. The gods and goddesses, all the elements, everything is there. And so the visualization is, has the potential to tap into that, or naming things has the potential. But I do think if you are going to do that, in my opinion, you still need to start with the sensing so that it's very embodied and interior and not exterior visualizing, because it is a practice of interiorization.
Thank you. That was so perfectly put. Yeah, it definitely has been my experience. Very interesting. And I would say that for me, anyways, I think most of the teachers that I have met, if they're newer to guiding these kinds of practices, things like body scans and keeping it more of the body is actually easier than trying to rephrase everything and come up with the most
simple,
meaningful word you can think of for everything. And I'm sure that comes from time, right? Yes.
I like to say, be boring.
Yes, be boring. I love it.
You don't want to be you're not going to entertain people to sleep. And we are putting people to sleep. It's just that it's conscious, deep sleep. And so, I have 2 children. They still like me to stay in bed with them and put them to sleep every night. And they want, there's a certain pattern that we like to follow as the routine. And if I'm rubbing my son's back, he doesn't want me to move all over the place. He wants there to be this abhyasa in Sanskrit, repetition. We want a pattern. We want a repetition. We also want to sense and land in the body. We want to feel comfortable. We want the lighting to be just so. To fall asleep, we need things to be just so. We don't want a lot of distraction and changefulness, and we don't want to be entertained. And so when I'm working with students' scripts, there is a lot of, you said it this way before, and that works. Just keep saying it that way over and over again. You don't need to say it differently every time. Stick with it. Be boring. Be repetitive, because it takes us in very, very deep. It's the same with asana. You can teach the same sequence. I don't know whether you do this in Yin, but in my approach, sometimes what I do is I teach a sequence And then in the same class, I teach the exact same sequence again, like back-to-back repetition of the sequence. And it takes people very deep. And I don't need to say as much the second time through the sequence. And we're like layering in a pattern.
Yes.
And it takes us inside. And so the Yoga Nidra a script that guides people potentially as a vehicle into that state, I think needs simplicity and repetition. And as I said, you have to be a little boring, which is also hard for new teachers. They want to like show all their tricks and entertain. And there's a little more insecurity, which is normal when you're new to something. And then I think the more experience you get as a teacher, the more comfortable you are with doing the same thing over and over again and trusting that repetition is actually very deep. And what's what we crave as human beings actually is a lot of repetition.
I love that you said be boring, because I'm constantly telling the teacher trainers that I work with too, the same in Yin. And I did a whole episode called Yin Yoga is Not Entertainment, because it's like, but there is a certain, and I'm going to have to do an episode where I explain this because someone was offended by my use of the term a vinyasa bunny. But I'm thinking of it like a ski bunny, like the one who goes down the bunny hills. And it's that kind of a thing. There is a certain experience level of teacher or just where they're at in their life that does go to yoga to be entertained. When they go to the classes, typically where it's like, it's a totally different sequence each time, and it's more choreography than yoga, and it's got a pump and playlist, and they never know what's coming next. And it's that, if that is coming to my class, they're going to find it boring.
Right.
But I always say it's my job as the teacher then to identify that actually this isn't a boring practice. We're just moving you from your external environment to your internal landscape.
Yes.
And so it's subtle, but there's lots going on in here.
There's nothing boring
There's
at all.
There's nothing boring going on in there. Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's very true. In the inner landscape, it's not boring at all. But but the techniques to get there are boring in that, they're repetitive and simple.
Yes. Yeah. So beautiful. What would you say, how often then, because you're talking about being boring, which I love, because I noticed for myself that I really only change, like I teach registered semesters. So it's the same people for 10 to 12 weeks, depending where Easter is. And I tend to only change my Nidra practice seasonally. And I do pull in some kind of seasonal elements to it. I might say in fall, I might use the word, letting go, for example, how often, because I know that there are teachers out there right now that feel pressured to come up with a brand new Yoga Nidra script for every single class. But remember, Kaya said, be boring. So
let me tell those teachers something.
Yes, please do.
I did the same exact script in every class at the beginning and the end, usually, of every class for 10 years. I never changed it. And it was the same. Sometimes the students were coming 2-3 times a week to classes. So how many, you do the math, 6 times a week, they were hearing that same. Never once did anyone say this is boring, and maybe they were thinking it, but so what? Because it's meant to be. And then over time, I abandoned that script as the only thing I ever did. And I moved into expanding it in different ways. But even now I have a bunch of Yoga Nidras, or a handful anyway, on SoundCloud. And I have students that for 5 years have been doing the same Nidra guided awareness on SoundCloud, the same one recording every night. So I think repeat the same script. If it works, it works. And I also love some degree of entertainment. I've never really sat down and thought about a percentage, but to go, to stick with this kind of repetition versus entertainment conversation, you have to there has to be some entertainment We said that at the beginning. There is a performative aspect to being a good teacher. Yoga Nidra less so, but I love the idea of changing it seasonally or changing it for a block or changing it by the theme. If you're doing Yoga Nidra combined with, say, an asana practice or something like that. Or some of my students do guided Yoga Nidra scripts personalized for clients. Like I have a student who's an Ayurvedic practitioner. And so she will make a script and then audio record it for her different clients, depending on their needs. And then they will just listen to that audio recording every day. So there's a lot of different ways, I think, to have variety, which isn't, think about variety is built into nature. We crave variety as human beings, but we also crave repetition. Think about when you go to your favorite restaurant, what do? You order the same damn thing every time. And even on the way to the restaurant, you might be thinking, maybe I'm going to change it up. And then you get there and what do? You're like, oh, but I want that same thing. That's why I come here. So we crave that repetition. And it's funny you mentioned the seasonal, because I was going to say, even with how we would eat, if we were really eating, traditionally, what would you do? You would eat what comes in the season, and you would eat the hell out of it for that season. And then you don't look at it again until that season comes back. So you repeat. So there's repetition inbuilt, but then by the season, there's also variety built in to us naturally. And we are nature. So finding something seasonal, whether it's the literal seasons or whether it's 12 weeks or 6 weeks or something, and sticking with that repetition that's reliable, that takes people really deep, and then building in variety by changing it here and there, depending on the class or the purpose or the student, I think is a good balance of that variety and symmetry and variety. Yeah.
I loved it. You talked about the favorite restaurant thing. I thought that was just me. I thought other people order other things, and I'm like, no, why would I mess with it? I mean, if I'm new somewhere and I haven't found my favorite thing, sure, I'll try some things. But once I found it, that's it. Also, I think that sometimes just from a neurological and nervous system response aspect, I think people don't realize, sometimes teachers don't realize, that actually repetition allows people to feel safe because they know what's coming. So they can relax in a deeper way than if they didn't. This is why people watch their favorite movie and their favorite TV show over and over again, or read the same book that they love so much more than once. It's because that familiarity and knowing what's coming is like a soothing thing as well.
Incredibly calming and grounding and landing, which is the basis of Yoga Nidra, is landing. Without landing, just like the basis of going to sleep is you need to lie down. You have to land to go to sleep. And as you say, that repetition is essential, reliable, knowing what's coming and no surprises is very calming and grounding and landing to the nervous system. So while in Yoga Nidra, we're going to land the body in Shavasana or some variation of that, where you're totally supported and landed physically, we also land internally in terms of the nervous system and so on, as you're saying, with that reliable, familiar repetition. The pacing of the voice has to be reliable, the tone of the voice reliable, all of that we want it to be boring, because that helps the nervous system land, which is the basis of Yoga Nidra. Without that, it's not possible.
Let's talk about voice for a moment. I find, because I'm a former singer, that I just instinctively know when to drop an octave, it just is, it's not something I had to think about.
Right.
Probably also comes from my colorful upbringing and the fact that I was the one who would go into each room and be like, okay, how is everybody? What do I need to do to make everybody okay? It's that too. But I know that a lot of teachers will struggle with having a voice that is projected and yet resonant enough that people can, so like, how do we find, I'm asking you
Yeah.
because I don't know how to guide people on how to find
How to
balance.
explain that.
Yeah.
So when I'm teaching Yoga Nidra, there's a couple things that I talk about. And so I say, you want to have your natural voice. It should sound natural. A lot of people, when they're doing a guided awareness, they shift into a robotic, especially if they're reading their script. You have to, and sometimes you have to read your script. I did that for years. And you can sound robotic when you're reading, you have like a reading voice. So you have to be careful not to sound robotic or mechanical. You also have to avoid going into that flight attendant voice. And now you're going to notice your feet. And now just bring your attention up to your ankles, right? You cannot do flight attendant voice. It's not natural. And we know instinctively the nervous system knows what's natural, and the nervous system coils against something that feels or sounds unnatural. And sound, of all of the senses, is the most sensitive and the most expansive. So I don't know about in Yin, but in Vedic tradition, we say that sound is the sense that is associated with the element of space, which is the most expansive. And we want that space element for Yoga Nidra because we want to go into the internal space. So sound is so important, and we're sensitive to sound. So you have to sound natural, not mechanical, and not flight attendant-y or whatever that kind of tone is, and not too high and not too low. It has to be in the range of your own natural register. Some people have higher register, some lower register. It has to be within that range. Don't go lower than how you would sound, and don't go higher. And then within that, yes, as you said, you have to project. And again, I'll revert to what the Vedic tradition says about this, which is that a lie comes from the throat and the truth comes from the belly, from the knobby, the belly button. And so this as with a singing background, if you're projecting your voice, if you're singing and you want the singing to sound authentic and sustainable and have a rich sound, you cannot sing from your throat. If I talk from my throat right now, it's going to sound like that. And then I have to raise the volume, right, to project. If you speak from your throat, you have to turn up the volume to project it. If you speak from the belly, you can have an as though soft tone and as though quiet tone, but it projects. And that takes some training. And actually, since this is an adult only podcast, I'll share this. My sister had nodes on her vocal cords when she was a teenager, because we grew up singing. Our mom is a professional singer, and my sister also did a lot of screaming as a teenager. So she developed nodes on her vocal cords, and she went to see a vocal coach. And the vocal coach would say, she had a thick accent, and she would say, "Sing from the vagina."
Actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Your
we could say,
floor,
speak from the tailbone.
The pelvic floor and diaphragm connection. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
So I think to help with that, for those who struggle with that, and I think it's good for everybody, when you're guiding a guided awareness, you need your body to feel comfortable and you need your spine to be upright. You ought not be lying down. You ought not be slumping and slouching, but you ought also not be in a rigid position. So get your yoga props, sit on a bolster or some folded blankets, prop your knees, or if you are better off standing, then stand. What is a position in which you can be upright, torso, and relaxed? If you have to sit in a chair, that's your best yoga prop for being able to speak naturally, but also project and have a soothing, smooth tone. Then sit in a chair. It doesn't matter. Those are all vehicles to get you to that destination of that voice that's effective as the vehicle for Yoga Nidra. There was something else I was going to say about the voice, which just is, what I was going to say is you kind of want to use the voice that you would use if you were helping a child fall asleep. right? You
Yeah.
want to have that motherly or fatherly loving tone, which isn't condescending, because children don't want to be condescended to either any more than adults do. But that tone that a good parent would use putting a child to sleep is natural and soothing. But then because it's a class, you want to project. And there's one more tip, which you would have learned in the Yoga Nidra program, which is if you're having students lie in Shavasana for a guided awareness, have their heads toward you and their feet away from you. If their feet are towards you, it's literally blocking the sound. If their heads are toward you, then the sound of your voice will kind of wash over their heads. So
I teach heads towards me, period, the end, full stop,
right.
always. But
totally.
The other thing I wanted to address before we kind of fully gather and slowly wrap up is when I started thinking about yin and then offering nidra at the end. And this might only be in my head. I'm sure my students did not know or care. I was a little bit, how do I move from what's been, a little bit of talking at the beginning of class, especially if there are people that are new to yin. I do feel like it's not fair to just sort of throw them to the wolves if they're used to flowing and be like, all right, sit still. I'm going to drink my tea over here and not tell you what to expect. Like I do feel like a little bit of a setting of the stage, but by about pose 3, I'm moving into like almost no talking unless I'm guiding them in and out of the shape. Or if I see something come up in the room, I might make a prop suggestion but otherwise I'm pretty quiet. And then I thought, well, then I want to do nidra at the end, but now that's more talking again. And will the students feel like we just went from like talking to silence to, and what I decided to do, what logically came to me, was that I didn't do as detailed of a body scan when I was doing yin. So I would still mention areas of the body, but I wouldn't do like index finger, middle finger. I might do hand instead, just to minimize. So any thoughts you have on that? And
that was what I was going to say. I would think if you are teaching a practice that is very slow and very quiet and very body awareness sensing based, then you go into a guided awareness, you have to know where are you picking up the thread. You're not taking people that are in off the street, that have just been driving, that have just been talking to people, etc., where you need to start at point A. You're kind of already partway through the alphabet, so to speak. You've already driven partway to your destination. And so you would pick up as though you're partway to your destination. So yeah, what you're doing is pretty much what I was going to say. You would start off saying less. You would start off at a slower pace with more space between your words, as though you're already 5 minutes, 10 minutes into a yoga nidra. You're picking up the thread there. Whereas if they're just in off the street, then you're going to maybe start with a little faster pace, a little more detail, potentially a little more sensing from outside in, and they're already in. So yeah, I would go with that. And having said that, I don't know yin, and I don't like to speak about things that I don't have expertise in, but for myself, in a therapeutic slow style, I for years loved to start with guided awareness because it helped the students come interior, land in the body, slow down, so that then the pranayama and the asana practices that followed were deeper. But then we would do yoga nidra at the end again, and that would be different. It was like the first one was to sort of take the edge off.
Yep.
Right? Take the edge off and land, and then do the practice. And then the second yoga nidra guided awareness really was more likely to take people into that yoga nidra state. And also a tip for the teachers is that first guided awareness, if you were to do that, if you were to start a practice with a guided awareness, it helps you land. It slows you down. It makes you more comfortable with being bland, being a little bit boring, because you're so deep yourself that you kind of don't even really want to entertain at that point. And it gives you that yoga bhava, that yogic state that you need to guide them.
I do a guided just call it a guided centering because it's not really
Yeah.
a nidra at the start while people are in
Yeah.
constructive rest. Yeah.
And do you find it helps you as a teacher?
Yes.
Like by the time you get to the end of it, you're different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're ready
Yes.
then. Yeah. For what's to come. Oh, beautiful. I think you and I could probably talk about this forever, but we should probably slowly wrap it up. Is there anything I forgot to ask you that you would like to add?
No, I feel like we talked about a lot. I don't
I
feel
know.
anything missing.
So juicy. All right. Tell everybody where they can find you. So you're obviously your website and that's where your courses and your Sangha are, and then anything else that you want to mention.
Okay. My website is Yoga with Kaya, Kaya, all spelled out. And you can find the Nectar of Nidra program there and do it actually self-paced if you're interested in training to guide Yoga Nidra and train to write your own scripts. That's on the website. And then a lot of people like the Instagram thing. So you can find me there doing some Sanskrit pronunciation and some other things. And that's just my name, Kaya Mindlin, on Instagram.
I have to say some of my favorite videos that you do on Instagram, other than the kitchen ones, are the ones where you haven't done one in a while, but where you were doing reels on Sanskrit, but you had your boys with you.
Yes.
So cute.
They still love to do them. I don't know at what point, if every time I ask, do you want to do Sanskrit video, they immediately say yes. So I'll do some more soon.
It's just so cute to see them both.
No,
not how you say it. So sweet. Well, I'm glad we finally managed to get this going. And obviously things happen when they're supposed to. So here we are. And you and I will say our proper goodbyes once I hit stop record. But for those of you that are listening or watching, thank you so much for hanging out with my friend Kai and I. And bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.